Okay. Yeah. So hi, welcome everyone. We are back with our second session of Sitecore User Group Kerala, where this time Kiran Patil from Horizontal is sharing his knowledge. That is, he has started a session, a four series session on XM Cloud, where this is the last and final session, which talks about deployment, XM Cloud deployment with Vercel Netlify. So yeah, hi team. I'm passing over to Kiran.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's session, which is final session, as Sri mentioned, for the XM Cloud deployment. And thanks, Sri, for organizing this. It's good to see the user groups uh, being organized in India. S- Just to recap, we have done 4 sessions throughout the August month on XM Cloud, starting from scratch. So if you don't know XM Cloud, the session 1 is for you. And if you would like to talk about deployment, the last session is for you. And then we have covered all the other aspects like development, deployment, list organized. Uh, Go to the list. It has all the sessions, links bundle. Introduction. I've been working at Horizontal for 11 years. My current role is Group Technology Director. I'm working from Minneapolis headquarters office, so it's a little bit early for us, but happy to share the knowledge even in the early morning. I've been working in Sitecore industry since 2009, so roughly like 13, 14 years I've been spending time on Sitecore technology. So I have seen Sitecore evolving from 6.2 to the current XM Cloud version. And then I have been Sitecore Technology MVP for 12 years. I have been first one from India, and then I blog it on this URL. I also been CoView MVP and also first few folks from certified on CDP and XM Cloud. So that's about me. Let's talk about XM Cloud deployment. So this is the architecture diagram which we reviewed in the first session, where in case you didn't attend the first session, we'll go through that. So this is the whole XM Cloud architecture, where as a developer, mostly if you're developers here, you'll be sitting here. You'll have your code repo on either GitHub or Azure DevOps. Um, and then your customizations are twofold. One is XM customizations, which is basically around C# and .NET framework and config files, and the front-end application, which is Next.js or React or Vue or whatever framework you are using for the host. So front-end application, which can be hosted on static hosting like Vercel, Netlify, Azure, and then site visitors will go there. And then whenever you have XM customizations, that can be deployed using two ways. One is CLI or XM Cloud Deploy app. This is an UI based app, which we will see. And then CLI is basically if you want to automate something, then you can do that. Whatever you can do from the portal or the deploy app, everything can be done from CLI. The build and deployment services is out of the box available by Sitecore, and that does all the magic behind the scenes. It deploys on Sitecore CM environment, which is your XM Cloud instance, and then Pages connects to it. And authors mainly use Pages, and then when you publish the content, it goes to Experience Edge, and then your Vercel Netlify will fetch the content from Experience Edge, either at runtime or at build time, based on your pre-rendering configurations. So that's how the whole XM Cloud architecture works. So now let's talk about the XM Cloud deployment process, and let's talk about this overall process, how it works. So when your XM Cloud deployment, and again, when I say XM Cloud deployment, in simpler terms, the backend deployment, your C# code deployment. So we are talking about that right now, plus infrastructure deployment, because infrastructure plus backend code is kind of one group of deployment. And then your front end, which is your React or Next.js code, that's other part of deployment. We'll talk about that in the next section. So in this section, only focusing on infrastructure and the code. So whenever your deploy app deploys the codes behind the scenes, it all works on the container based technology Behind the scenes, Sitecore is provisioning the container and then fetching the artifacts, building the solution, creating the items as resources, and publish the deploy package. And then that container is built, and then that it gets deployed, and then some post actions happen and deployment is completed. So that's how this whole deployment works in XM Cloud backend deployment. So to provision an environment, if you remember the old days when you had to provision an environment, you have to write ARM templates or talk to your DevOps folks. But here you can do that using the deploy portal, uh, where from the UI you can provision your own environment in 5 minutes or less. You can do that via CLI in case you want to automate something. And you can also do that using REST API, which is Sitecore has exposed that REST API. Behind the scenes, when you use deploy app, the REST API is being used. The deploy artifacts, when you want to deploy your custom code, you can do that using CLI or UI. Uh, Sitecore XM Cloud supports GitHub and Azure DevOps both. So earlier when I was writing this slide, only GitHub was supported, but now Azure DevOps support has been added. Um, XM Cloud deployment composition for the backend, as we all know, for the backend, we have compile assemblies, configurations like patch files, environment variables, your config transformations, your items, and publishing and indexing is part of backend deployment. So that's one part of deployment. And the second part is front-end deployment, which is your front-end components or middleware or Azure, like Azure functions or Edge functions. So that's how there are two categorical deployment which will happen. So we'll talk about the infrastructure first, how to deploy the infrastructure. So we also used to use term in the past, environment provisioning. So both are the same. So you can use the deploy app, which is UI based, which is straightforward and mostly all the clients or all the projects I have seen being used. But in case there are some automation requirements, you can use CLI, where you have this command .NET Sitecore Cloud project name. You can provide a project name and create the project environment and deployment. And then if you want to go more fancy due to whatever reason, you can also use the deploy API. We'll see the demo when we go into the demo section. So in summary, there are three approaches to deploy the infrastructure. Deploy app, which is UI based. Mostly people will use that. CLI, uh, if something needs to be automated, and then deploy API in case you want to use the API for provisioning. Now let's talk about the backend deployment, which is your code and assemblies. So to deploy that, the most important file in the XM Cloud repo is xmcloud.build.json. We'll see a live file as well. But this file is kind of a core which provides all the deployment instructions to XM Cloud. It deploys your items, build targets, rendering host, everything is configurable here. So if you look at the schema of this file, it has deploy items, basically which items should be deployed. And here you just provide your serialization files, right? You have serialization files, and then you just provide the name. It also supports uh, wildcard support, which means you can provide .star, which means any of your serialization file uh, having foundation.star that should be deployed. So that's how it works. Build targets means which solution should be built, like your CS pros or solution files, right? You can provide those here in case you have multiple CS pros, you can provide it here. In case you want to deploy anything on rendering host, which is basically your kind of an editing host behind the scenes, you can configure it here. This is not Vercel, just kind of an editing host configuration. So don't get confused with that. Transforms is mainly for transformations. In case you want to patch file something, let's say in the config file, you want to remove the compilation debug true to false. All those things in the web config uh, or other config file will be happening here. Post actions, once the deployment is done, the post actions will be done, which has multiple tags. The first is warm up CM. Basically, post deployment, if you want to run any warm up steps or any execution steps, you can just provide the URLs, the related URLs, and this will be done on the CM environment. So once the environment is done, as we know that initially the share UI takes time to load. That's why all this cell, which is a part of a share UI, has been provided. Populate schema. If you want to populate some schema, you just provide the index names. Behind the scenes, XM Cloud still uses Solar for some backend things, and then search text is being leveraged. But that's all abstracted from us, so you don't know, but it's there. The publishing point of view, this is your publishing node where you can publish your items with item IDs and languages and target. So you can configure that as well. So you don't need to configure additional modules. Everything is part of XM Cloud configuration. So this is a real live file where you can see we have post actions, we have publishing, like we are publishing site core with, we are not doing a republish, it's a smart publish. We are publishing on edge, and then we are publishing in language. In this example, we have some transforms going on here. We also have some utility function, ASPX page being deployed, which we start. And then there is a core index, master index, and horizon index we rebuild. And then we also publish in multiple language, EN and FRCA. So that's how this XM Cloud build.json, this is on the root level. We'll see this file in the solution structure. The other important aspect of backend deployment is your patch files, because at times Sitecore will provide you that, hey, patch this particular configuration. You can still do that. You can use the patch files. You can deploy the old standard way. You can create the folder structure and deploy it. If you want the environment variable support, right? For example, if you have SMTP server address as one of the config patch file, the value will vary by environment. So what you can do is you can configure, you can use this syntax like $env current and like SMTP server address. And then from the XM Cloud portal, you create the environment, provide the value and the target environment, like which environment is this. And then when the deployment happens, if it is happening on the QA, it will take the QA value. If it is happening on production, it will take the production value. So you can still do that. And then if you want to still deploy your code using CLI, which I don't see any reason earlier when Azure DevOps was not supported, people were using this mechanism, but now it is supported. So unless you are on some legacy version control mechanism which doesn't work with Sitecore XM Cloud, then might need to use this approach. So here to deploy the file, basically what you do is .NET Sitecore Cloud deployment create. You just provide the upload and upload your kind of an artifact which you created, and then it will deploy there. To deploy item, you can just do a Sitecore serialization push, and then you can push it on the target environment. And you have to make sure that allow write flag is true. I don't recommend this approach from local. We should never do this from local because your local might have some working feature which gets accidentally deployed. So always try to make sure that you have even a small project, have a small CI/CD server from where the artifacts gets deployed. Never deploy it from the local environment. And then the cloud deployment has multiple commands where you can watch the deployment, what you can look at the deployment logs. Everything can be done using the CLI. Now, let's see the demo of the first part, and then we can go to the second part. So this is my solution, which I have opened in VS Code. As you can see here, I can create an environment and all those things I can do from the command, which we'll be not doing, but just wanted to let you know. In Sitecore Cloud, I can get an environment list, I can get the project list. Everything is possible from the command, and you can use that, the CLI. I'm not logged in, that's why it is showing unexpected error. The approach which most of the projects I have seen leverages is using the XM Cloud Deploy app. So when you log into portal, you click on the Deploy app, which will open this particular app. From here, if you have still entitlements available where you can create the project, you can create a project from here, right? Which is basically creating your main container. And then in that one project, you can have multiple, in the one project, you can have multiple environments. So let's say I have the dev environment right now, but I can, if I want to create, let's say, UAT environment, I can do that. Is this a production environment? No. I want to link to a branch. Yes. Auto deploy and push to repository. Yes. When this happens, but I'll just select no for now. When you say yes, it will automatically, as soon as the git commit happens, it will automatically deploy. And I'll create this environment. So now when I click this, behind the scenes, XM Cloud will provision additional environment, which is a UAT environment. It will have its own file system. It will have its own uh, database and everything. So think of this as your separate physical box, which is getting provision. And once this is ready, you can leverage this for UAT. And then you can also create your own production environment and stuff like that. So all these things are possible using the deploy portal, and which mostly you'll be using. Then talking about the backend code, right? Mainly when you are working on this starter kit based solution, right? You will create your components. If you remember in the first session, we created a component and we did a serialization. So all my serialized files are here. So let's say if I look at the rendering, this is the rendering which we created. It works based on the YAML based rendering. So you can see XMC basics rendering we created in the first session. We also create a template for that. So templates are here, the website template, the code for that particular component. This is the code which we wrote is here, right? And then if you have, we didn't do anything, but in case you have any particular C# change, you will have your C# change in the platform folder. And once you are ready, what you can do is you can commit those changes. And as soon as you commit those changes, the deployment will start. The only important thing which you need to make sure happens before you deploy is your in the root level, you must need to make sure that you have xmcloud.build.json file, and that file has all the configurations which you need to configure one time for the deployment. So that's how this overall uh, deployment works. Now talking about the environment variables, right? So environment variables are per environment as the name suggests. So let's say if I'm going on the dev environment, I can click on the variables, and then whatever variables are here, I can modify it from here. Or if you want to create a new variable, let's say I would say SUG Kerala is variable name and the value is same. Is it a secret? No, it's not secret. And then which is target environment? Mostly this will be CM. So I'll save this. So now my environment is new variable has been added. And when I want to refer this in my config patch files, I can use this variable name. So yeah, this is how the backend deployment works. You can ask me questions at any point of time, or you can ask questions in the end as well. I'm cool with either way. And the last approach, which we also discussed, is REST API based. In case you want to provision your environment, right, using the REST API. This is an API endpoint which Sitecore has exposed, where it provides all the endpoints to create an XM Cloud deployment using REST API. So let's say if you want to uh, look at the environment, organization, do a deployment, everything can be done using this. If you want to look at the environment, if you want to restart the environment, everything you can do from this particular screen. Install, validate. So yeah, in case you have some need, you can explore this particular thing. Just wanted to call it out that this option is there. I have not seen any project where we leveraged it, but it varies by requirement. So that's about the backend deployment. We'll talk about the front end deployment now. So For the front-end deployment, there are multiple approaches, and the most popular are Vercel and Netlify. There are also other approaches which we'll talk in this upcoming section. So let's talk about the Vercel deployment. Before we talk about Vercel internals, like why Vercel is popular, because Vercel was the initial uh, partnership done by Sitecore for hosting your front end. Vercel is the creator of Next.js. So whenever they have the Next.js version, Vercel will have the first class support. But at the same time, the other competitors are also trying to provide the first class support. So that benefit is there, but it's not an huge differentiator. But still keep that in mind that Vercel is kind of creator of Next.js. So this is the overall architecture, how Vercel works. Behind the scenes, it works on the container-based technology, right? And then it has edge locations and firewall and static storage behind the scenes. This is how overall the Vercel environment looks like. So when you deploy using Vercel, right, and we'll see how the deployment works. There are multiple approaches. One, you can use deploy using CLI. You can deploy using deployment hooks. You can also deploy using REST API, and then it supports all the sub version controls, and even Azure DevOps support has been added recently. So if you want Azure DevOps, it is there. So the way it works, you are a developer sitting here, you commit your code, right? There are feature branches and the main branch. So when it is a feature branch, Vercel will see, okay, this is a feature branch commit. So Vercel will kind of provision your preview deployment, and each preview deployment has an URL, like temporary URL like this, like project name, git hyphen branch name, and some uh, additional characters to create your URL. So you will have your unique URL per feature. So let's say you are working on a hero banner component and you are committing the hero banner code. Vercel and Vercel will be able to deploy that on a hero banner branch, and will have a hero banner URL, which you can send it to your QA team that, hey, you start validating my hero banner component. It is ready for validation. Make sure that this is not an integrated test. Once your hero banner is kind of isolated tested, you can merge that. As soon as you merge it to a main branch, which is also production branch, Vercel will see that, okay, this particular deployment came from the main branch, then it will deploy to a production deployment. That's what they call it, production deployment or preview deployment. And this is when it will start seeing, start visible to the end users, to the public. Now, if you want to don't do automatic deployment on the production, you can stop that as well. It's all configurable. What you can do is once your preview deployment branch release artifact is looking good, you can also manually, there is a button where you can click and say promote to production. It will automatically deploy it here. So if you want more control, you can have it. If you want to automate, you can have it. So it's up to you. And then you can also configure some password protection, or you can also enable comments. So they can add a comment. If they find any bug, they can also add a comment in line on the feature or preview deployments. Once the deployment happens, you can see the deployment summary where it shows like IV deployed 2 middlewares and then multiple static assets, functions, ISR functions has been deployed. So how to configure your deployment with Vercel? So there are multiple approaches. There is a deploy app connector where you can connect this app. Um, and then the manual approach where you need more control. You basically have to connect your Git repo or Azure DevOps repo, provide some configurations and environment variables, and then just deploy. For the environment variables, right, you have to make sure that if you are on the older version, which is JSS 21.5 or earlier, then you need to have uh, more variables. But now Sitecore simplified it with the new version, which is latest version, where you just need to provide the context ID. Behind the scenes, a lot of things will be automatically populated for you. So that's how it works. And if you want to read more, you can read more. The root directory is src i6 starter. Uh, so I'll show you that how it works. We'll see a demo as well. Now let's talk about the Netlify deployment. So Netlify deployment is kind of same philosophy. They also have the feature, the preview deployment and everything. So you have to configure everything here, like same stuff, nothing different. Only the UI is different a little bit. And then make sure that you select the Next.js as a runtime environment and then configure a variable and you are done. So same, both approaches are same. So based on your requirement and situation, you'll be using either of it. You might ask me like, which one is better, Vercel or Netlify? And I spent good amount of time researching it. But the conclusion of all the research and reading and experience says that it depends on your scenario, your team skill set, your requirement, which feature you are looking, because there are few, almost the features are same, but there are few features are different here, or different there. So it all depends. I would say that do a proper research, do a price comparison, look at the features, and then if based on your skill set and requirement, you can choose one. You cannot go wrong in either of those, but you have to do your own research. But both are almost, as I mentioned, similar from the functionality point of view. And you want to, if you want to know about the other approaches, like there are some other approaches available like Amplify and all those things, AWS. Azure also has their static hosting, but it is still kind of earlier phase. Vercel and Netlify are kind of the best solutions we have seen. In case you want to be more adventurous, you can also host your own Node.js and deploy the Next.js on that, but it won't scale as Vercel and Netlify, because Vercel and Netlify automatically scales based on the request. And then you also get the benefit of edge servers they have and locations they have throughout the world. So that's something you will miss. So, but it depends, like few client might not need it. They don't need it that much complexity. So you can explore that based on the need. This is a nice session by Himadri in the site curator group Columbus. So I have provided a link here. You can go through the link from here. And then, yeah, it's time for demo. So once you have your code repo, right, and in this example, I'm using GitHub, uh, you need to configure your SXA because all your Next.js code is residing in this particular directory, right? So that's why we provide this as a root, because Vercel and Netlify are doing nothing but hosting this particular directory and providing that Node.js based Next.js runtime environment. So when you log into your Vercel environment, you can add new project, and then here you have to configure your, provide your GitHub repository, right? I already done that, so I'll not do that again. Uh, but in case you are starting new. So here, there are multiple configurations. The first thing is deployments. You can look at the deployment. You can promote the deployment. If it is feature branch, this is main branch. That's why it is, you don't see a promote to production because it's already on production. And you can also do a rollback if it is feature deployment or multiple deployments are there. You can enable analytics. There are some pricings there. You can look at the speed insights. You can also look at the runtime logs, and you can also connect the logs to a log system, so you can get the logs persisted. The firewall feature is recently added, so you can also have the firewall support. In case you want to connect to a database, you can do that. And then here, the main configurations are here, where you provide your root directory. This is most important. And then the other most important thing is environment variables. Once you have all these two things, you can do a deployment. As I mentioned, you can configure the log drains. Basically, your logs will be persisted for the future. So yeah, once you have that, your Vercel environment is ready, and then it will have a production URL like this. You can also do a domain mapping, right? And as I mentioned, like you can also enable this toolbar where someone can provide a comment that, hey, for example, think of this as a customer and he or she is doing a validation and they doesn't like this hero banner. They'll say hero banner needs some work. So when you log into this URL or you access this URL, and if you are logged into your Vercel instance, you will see this comment and you'll probably say, okay, fixed and deployed. So you'll reply like this with a screenshot as well. Uh, let's say if you want to also take a screenshot of this particular thing, you can take it and then you can upload it here that yes, the change has been done. So you'll be able to see. So all these things are there in the Vercel. This is all part of Vercel default offering. So this reduces the like no need to create a Jira ticket or something like that. They can provide a comment here, and then you can as a developer can also work on that. Uh, and then I just want to show you the output. This is how the output will look like, where you have pages and everything working, right? So now we'll talk about Netlify. Similar, once you log into Netlify, you can create a project and connect to repo, and then you have to configure site configurations. Main configurations are in the build and deploy, where you configure your Next.js environment, right? And then you also configure your environment variables, right? So you configure the environment variables, and then you deploy. So that's how this particular deployment works. And then once you configure those and deploy, your environment is hosted on Netlify. It is same architecture, similar things, so nothing different here. So yeah, that's how this overall deployment works on Vercel and Netlify. Any questions? Yeah, go ahead, Sai.
Thanks, Kiran. It was really good, wonderful session.
Mhm.
I have this one question because I don't have a real-time experience of this. I started trying this. Uh, so the rendering host, for example, the front end, the Vercel front end is the is the components that the user will be seeing on the web page, right? Now,
Yes.
when we are seeing the when we are doing editing, like page editing
Mhm.
on the experience,
Mhm.
sorry, the editing mode.
Mhm.
So at that time, the rendering host takes cares of rendering the content, the UI work. So basically, the XMC will be rendering the Next.js components.
Mm, yeah, so in the editing mode, right? I think
Yeah,
I'll just
yeah,
let me summarize it. So when your public visitor is visiting the website, your Vercel or Netlify will provide the final production output, right? And when you are in experience editor mode, or let's say pages, right? You're expressing pages.
yeah, yeah,
Behind the scenes, when you provision an XM Cloud environment, it provisions two things. The first thing is your XM Cloud instance, which is basically nothing but an IIS based, AKS based XM Cloud site with database and file system. Plus, it also deploys a small Node.js based editing host behind the scenes, and that gets leveraged whenever someone is in editing mode. That gets leveraged.
yeah, yeah. Makes sense. Yeah.
Makes sense? Yeah.
Uh,
But the deployment artifacts is same. So whatever you are deploying from SXS starter, that will be
yeah,
deployed on editing host. So when you deploy on your XM Cloud instance, it deploys your C# code configs plus deploys the SXS starter to your editing host.
yeah, yeah. I have one more question, but I want, if at all, it will be covered in your next session, so we can, it can wait. The question is related to the SSG and ISG. So if at all it's
Mhm.
getting covered in the next session, I can wait.
No, I think the series is ending here, but yeah, go ahead with your
Oh,
question.
okay. The question is like the ISG, how we will handle this ISG part, like how it gets handled. Uh, like whenever user updates, the content editor updates some content on the site,
Hmm.
sorry, on the XMC,
Hmm.
the pipeline has to run again. The deployment pipeline will run again, or the Next.js has some revalidate which takes care of all the stuff.
Yeah.
That
So I think yeah. So there are two parts, right? The SSG is basically you whenever the deployment happens, it will fetch the content from GraphQL and create the kind of static HTML. And there is one more
yeah,
configuration which is known as ISR, right? Where you provide your ISR configurations and you provide a value. Let's say the default value is I think around 60 or 90. So the ISR stands for incremental static regeneration,
yeah,
right? So
yeah,
let's say you provide the revalidate 60. So what will happen is, uh, let's say you are a home page, right? and home page is basically cached for 60 seconds. After 60 seconds, Next.js will make a call to your backend system and then see if any new content is there. If it is there, it will revalidate, so basically invalidate the current copy and then fetch the new data and show that output. So that's the one way to do it. Uh, and this is how I think it works. And if there is no content, let's say if your XM Cloud environment is even down, uh, XM Cloud, the Vercel or Netlify will take care of it. They will not even show any error. It will still keep serving the cached copy till the XM Cloud server is available and there is a new content available, right? That's the one approach. The other approach is, I think, just let me see if I can find that Vercel deployment XM Cloud. So other approach, what you can do is you can configure a webhook. So as we were seeing in this one, right? In the settings, you can configure a webhook. As of now, there is no,
Okay.
but you can create one. Now, what can happen, right? Let's say deployment, create a deployment status. You can configure a webhook, and what you can do is in the edge, you can also configure a webhook, and then whenever the publishing happens, right, the edge will send a message to Vercel that hey, it's time to redeploy or rebuild the application and deploy the new
Yeah.
code. But mostly
Yeah.
ISR in the production is being used, but there's also an approach where you need to kind of redeploy for whatever reason. This is also an approach.
Yeah. 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 Thanks.
Make sense?
Thanks, Kiran. Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, there is a question from Akshay.
Yeah, Akshay, go ahead.
Yeah, first of all, thank you, Kiran, for sharing your valuable insights on this. So the question is with continuation of ISR only. As we see that we normally give 60 seconds as the revalidation period, but now if I'm not having an enterprise application in Vercel and I am having a pro account, so in that what happens is the data cache rights also counts in your billing cycle, right? So in that, as you have shown, the webhooks comes into picture.
Yeah.
But so for example, like if I want to clear the cache only for few of the pages, at that time, the webhook from the XM Cloud configuration would not be applicable, but the webhooks from the content editor that we are allowed to create would be applicable. Am I
Yes. Yeah, you are
correct
right.
on this? Oh,
Yep.
yeah. Okay. Okay. That was the question. Yeah.
Yeah, because and just to explain for others, like with XM Cloud, you can also create webhooks on publishing. So with publishing webhooks, right, you can do whatever, and then that's something leveraged for clearing cache. But yeah, I think you got it, Akshay.
Yes. Yes.
Cool. Any more questions?
I
Yeah, go
have
ahead, Sai.
one. Yeah, I have one last one regarding upskilling on the Next.js.
Mhm.
So is it like because there are many frameworks that are surfacing when we are trying to upskilling ourselves. So
Mhm.
is it worth going only in Next.js direction? Because there is one more framework, Next NUXT.
Mhm.
There are many things coming up. So what's your personal take on that? Yeah, a bit confused from especially from transitioning from hardcore .NET to these frameworks.
Yeah. I think it's an interesting. We are at the interesting junction, to be honest. Um, I think it will be good to wait till end of the year how things are going. The reason I'm saying end of the year because Sitecore is also working on some .NET Core thing, and at the same time, it also depends on your requirements, right? For example, if you have a few clients who say, no, I need Next.js because our internal team is equipped with it. So once you complete your implementation, my internal team can take care of it. But there are a few folks who say, no, we need .NET Core based system, right? So Sitecore is also working. I think that's what they announced in SUGCon, that they are working on .NET Core based support. So I would say that learn Next.js for now, which you need to, I think we need to know Next.js for sure. But yeah, wait for end of the year just to see how things are going. It might be symposium, they might announce something. So I'll wait for that before you kind of
Yeah.
become pro in next years.
Yeah. Thanks, Kiran. Yeah.
And we also did a session to upgrading the skills. So in the SUGCon Europe. So I shared that link in chat in case you are interested.
Hey, Kiran, you
Go.
able to hear me?
Yeah, Bala, go ahead.
Hey, sorry, I had a question around Vercel has this build time limitation of like 45 minutes or so, right? So is there like, do you have any thoughts around that? Like with Netlify, do we have any build limitations or the number of pages that it could process at once?
I think in my report came out, enterprise will not have any limitation. The pro, you might have limitation. But what I found is the Netlify limitation on build time is higher than Vercel. So if kind of
Okay.
your build time is kind of configuring, then I would just say explore Netlify.
Okay. Because the reason I asked you is like I'm running into one of the customers having like close to 50K pages. So I'm not sure next days would it be appropriate to go that route or just stick with ASP.NET Core? Because the static generation is the whole point of moving into the next JS film of things.
Yeah.
And they are not willing to do Netlify or Vercel. So
Oh.
would it be able to handle this one, or did you run into any of these scenarios?
Yeah, I think yeah, that's a good point. Uh, what we usually do is we don't configure all the 50,000 pages for SSG, right? We only configure the top visited pages or sections. And for that, you can look at your Google Analytics. That's what we did for one of the client. They had a similar requirement like you. And what we did, we looked into their Google Analytics report, and then we asked them which of the pages or URLs are mostly visited, and then those we configured as part of an SSD. So they are kind of at build time, they are created. All the other pages might be the first user will have some hit, but after that it will be cached. So that's the path you can take.
Hey.
But if they are not
Kiran,
hosting
sorry, I
on
missed you for a minute. I was just driving in the home and I missed you for a minute. Like, can you repeat that, please?
Sure, yeah. So
Thank you.
for the requirements, right, what you have like 50,000 pages, what we have similar requirement.
Okay.
And what we do is like we don't do SSD for all the 50,000 pages. What we do is we look into clients Google Analytics report and try to find like top 10, 20 or 50 whatever pages or sections being visited, and we configured SSG only for those. The others are not SSG, so when the first user is visiting, they will be kind of uh, cached and stuff like that. So that's one path you can explore. Hope you got it this time.
I think he might be driving.
Yeah.
Not
It's Friday,
sure.
right? So Friday evening. Cool. Any more
Okay.
questions? We have time.
I think Bala is typing something. Yeah.
Awesome.
He's saying thank you.
Awesome. You're welcome. So yeah, I'll let you do the outro. But before that, this is the whole series session. As I mentioned, there are URLs mentioned here. But if you want to scan this QR code, it will take you to the playlist. And once Shri uploads the next session, I'll also add to the playlist. So playlist will have all the 4 sessions clubbed together. Yeah, over to you, Shri.
Thanks. Thank you, KP. So yeah, it was an honor to host you in our user group, and this session was really informative. So the whole series actually, those who want to learn about XM Cloud and advanced topics, this would be a great start for you. So thank you so much, KP, for for presenting in our user group.
No, you're welcome. Thanks for joining everyone, and thanks for hosting, Shri.
Yep. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.